Hello everyone, so glad to be here today. I have a couple questions for you. If you had to choose between going to the mountains or going to the beach, where would you rather go, the mountains or the beach? I think I'm a little bit more of a mountains person, but go ahead and put, where would you rather go, to the mountains or to the beach? Okay. All right, I have a next question for you. Have the next question for you. What would you rather do? Have the ability to do anything, or the ability to do everything, or the ability to know everything? So you have the ability to do everything or know everything. What would you rather have? The ability to do everything or know everything? I might be a little bit more on the doing side. I don't know. We'll see. Go ahead and put that in the chat. Okay, we're going to get a little bit tougher here. If you had to choose, would you rather have the ability to implement any and every project perfectly, but the ideas that you have, they were bad ideas, so you can implement bad ideas well, or have a variety of great ideas, so you have an endless amount of amazing ideas, but none of them are implemented? So you can have the ability to implement any idea, but the ideas that you have are not good. Or you have great ideas, but don't know how to implement them. This is a tough one. What side would you be on? All right. I have one last one. We're getting our mind going today. If you had to choose, would you rather work on a project with a team of people, or work on a project or implement a project by yourself? What would you prefer? Work with a team of people or work by yourself? Go ahead and put that in the chat. All right. Well, looks so good. Looks like we have a little bit of, kind of a little bit of everything. So, keep these ideas in mind. Again, as I said at the beginning, I'm so glad to be here. My name is Amber Vanderburg, and I am the founder of the Pathways Group, and I work with teams and organizations all over the world. So we actually work with organizations on every inhabited continent, and we help teams implement great ideas. And as I've worked with a variety of different teams, I find that there are some challenges, there are some phases, there are some aspects of implementation that are fairly consistent no matter the project. So today we are actually going to keep with one project in mind. So I'm going to have you think of a project that we're going to come up with a plan on how to implement this project today at the end of this 35 minutes. So go ahead and get out a piece of paper. You'll want to have that ready with you. We are going to be doing a variety of activities that you'll be using that paper to create your implementation plan. Now, before we get started, as I said, I've worked with a variety of different teams all over the world, and I find that all teams go through a series of different phases. They go through different cycles. And I find that it's really valuable to know these different cycles because it can give us an idea of what to predict, what is coming up next within our process or within our implementation process within our team. So come on over here, and I'm going to share some of those processes. So we'll get you a little bit closer so you can see everything. So the first process, or the first pendulum that I see within our teams, is that they go through a process where they first create decisions and make decisions. So at first, we look at the possibilities and we say, what are all the things that can be? What are all of the decisions that we can have, the choices that we have? So we are creating choices. And then we narrow those ideas down and say, okay, these are all of the possibilities we're expanding. Now it's time to make decisions. Now that one's pretty simple. So we're going to create decisions, create choices, make choices. Another trend that I see has to do with the confidence or with the emotion of implementation. And that looks a little something more like this. See, first, whenever we are in our inspiration phase or in our ideation phase, we have hope. We say, this is all that can be. And then as we continue working on our process, we take a dip into insight. So as we get more insight, this is where we see the challenges, where we see the obstacles, where we see the hurdles that we will have to face in our implementation process. This is no longer just an idea. Now it's actually in action, and we're seeing all of the possible limitations that can happen in this implementation. Now, having insight, that does not mean that we give up. It doesn't mean that we wallow, that we're super discouraged. It means that we now have insight, so we are prepared to confront and overcome the challenges that will be faced in our implementation process. This is really critical. But it's important to know that this is a trend within our implementation process. So we'll go from hope to insight to confidence. So we have hope. We see these challenges that we can face, and as we begin to overcome them, then we have confidence in our project. We have confidence in our implementation, and we have a better idea of what we can do moving forward. Now, I alluded to it earlier. There is also a trend of design thinking. So design thinking looks a little something like this. So at first we have inspiration. So this is whenever we are inspired to create a new product. We are inspired to, that we see a problem that can be fixed. We see something that can be done better. And then we take that inspiration and we move to ideation. In ideation, we say, okay, I think that this can be done better. We're inspired. Now, how can we make that better? All right, so this is when we come up with ideas. And then, last but not least, we implement. So we don't want to just sit around with glorious ideas. We want to actually implement purposefully, intentionally, and successfully. So we go from inspiration, ideation, to implementation. In fact, I find that oftentimes great ideas, brilliant, well-intended ideas, can be sabotaged through poor implementation. And so that's what we're going to talk a little bit more about today, is different factors that can sabotage great implementation. And then the last trend that I see within implementation phases actually comes from a psychologist named Bruce Tuckman. And Bruce Tuckman writes that all teams go through different phases. So, our teams start at a forming stage. When they form, we all come together. This could be for a new client, it could be for a new project, it could be for a new team. This is our stage whenever we're forming. And then we go into a storming phase. Whenever we storm, you'll notice that this line represents performance. And so our performance takes a slight dip when we ask ourselves, how are we going to operate? How are we going to communicate? How are we going to handle conflict? What are our expectations for our outcomes? What are our expectations in how we are going to work as a team? Here we're asking all of these questions. Who has what role? What does that person do, right? So this is when we're asking these questions. And as we ask these questions, we move into a norming state. So this means that through the storming phase, we have established norms and how our team is going to operate. And with the norming phase, we get about to the same level as whenever we first started into that forming stage. But this storming phase doesn't get us back up to normal. It actually catapults our performance into the performing stage. So the performing stage is whenever we are actually performing. That's whenever we're actually launching our product. It's whenever we are, I used to coach football or soccer. This is whenever we are actually going onto the pitch and playing a match. And so this is this performing stage. And then we enter into the adjourning stage. So adjourning is whenever we ask ourselves, this could be a retrospective, and we ask ourselves, what did we do really well? What can we do better? And as we go through the adjourning stage, we cut through the norms and enter back into the forming or storming stage, depending on the nature of your team, and you storm once again to establish better norms so that you can perform at a higher level the next time. So this is a consistent cycle where we cut through the norms in the adjourning phase. We enter in back through storming and forming, establish better norms so that we can perform at a higher level the next time. And this sounds all good and nice. You go, thanks, Amber. I'm glad I now know a lot of theories about the cycle of different teams. How does this actually apply to you? I'm glad you asked. See, whenever I work in teams, actually knowing where you are in the process can be really helpful in knowing where you are and where you are going. So I was working with a medical team a couple of months ago, and they were going through a massive rollout process, and they were in the insight phase. They were in the storming phase, right? So that's emotion and performance were not high. So they were a little bit low, but we recognized that we could be intentional in that phase to know what was coming next, right? So we're going to be intentional in our storming phases to establish better norms to go to that performing phase. We are seeing the challenges now, and as we overcome them with our wins, we will move into a state of confidence. In the same regard, if I'm at a performing stage, I know that the next phase means that I'm going to adjourn. I should adjourn to establish better norms to perform even better on the next level. And whenever you know this, it actually takes out this element of surprise of how did we get here? Well, this isn't a surprise, it's a process. We know that this is a cycle that is very common within teams. But as many teams as I've worked with, I've found that sometimes teams can get a little stuck. Teams can be trapped in certain phases. Oftentimes, teams or individuals find themselves trapped in the ideation phase. So we have a lot of ideas, but none are implemented. We're trapped in the storming phase where we're constantly trying to figure out how we're supposed to work together, but we're not ever really establishing norms so that we can perform at a higher level. There's a time to reevaluate and storm, but we must first establish the norms and perform. And after we go to that adjourning process, then we go back. There is a time whenever we could get stuck in the insight phase where we're only seeing the challenges. but we're not concentrating on those small wins to build confidence. I see some teams that are at that performing stage where they don't have a retrospective, they don't have an adjourning phase. And so while they are performing, the competition is having quicker cycles. So they're adjourning, storming, norming, performing. So they're going higher and higher. And so the idea with these theories, the idea with different phases of team development, different phases of project implementation, is that we are intentional in moving from one phase to the next with purpose. So, how do we move from one phase to the next? First, we must establish a sense of urgency. In fact, one of my favorite authors on change management, John Kotter, Kotter, actually writes that we must first establish a sense of urgency. This is a really important project, but why do we need to do this today? What happens if we wait another week? What happens if we wait another month? What happens if we don't do anything for a year? And sometimes if the answer is nothing, then it might not be that urgent. But if you have a project that you really want to get off the ground, you have to first establish a sense of urgency within your team and within your organization. Now, there's a few different ways that you can establish a sense of urgency. There's actually an entire book called A Sense of Urgency that you can read to get a variety of different ideas on how you can increase urgency within your team. But here are a few different ones that you can do today. First, you can bring in an outsider. So you can bring in an outsider. Next, you can act with urgency every day. Third, you can find opportunity in crisis. A lot of people found this opportunity in crisis, the opportunity to change, last year. And then lastly, you want to address the no-nos. So sometimes these are people that are very, very resistant to change. And so while you may have a very good idea, there might be other people on your team that do not want that change to happen. And so you must speak with these people too. You must speak with the no-nos or the people who are resistant to change to help increase that sense of urgency. So these are a few different ways that you can increase urgency. So I asked you to get out a piece of paper. I would love for you to write down a project idea that you have in mind, or an idea that you would like to implement. If you are with a work team, it could be work related. It could be the idea that you want to remodel the bathroom, right? So put down whatever idea that you have that you want to implement. And then right under that, I want you to write down, why does this need to be done today? What would happen if we don't do anything? Now, I asked the question earlier about what would happen if you would rather work with a team, implement a project all by yourself, or work with a team. And the reality is that if you can achieve your dream all on your own, then you're probably not dreaming big enough. If you want to do something bigger than yourself, then you're going to have to include more than yourself. And so, in order to successfully implement your idea, one of the biggest challenges that I see within teams is that the right people are not brought in to the team. One of the biggest challenges I see to successful implementation is that one person tries to implement all on their own, or not enough people or the right people are brought on to help with implementation. So what I want you to do is I want you to take your piece of paper and I want you to number it 1, 2, 3, number it 1 through 15. 1 through 15. And I want you to write down 15 people that champion your success. Sorry. I want you to write down 15 people that can help champion your idea success. You might say, Amber, 15? That is a lot of people. And you're right, it is. But I find that whenever we are in the midst of implementation, it's very easy to become overwhelmed. And proactively having a list of who we can call on is incredibly helpful. Give you a couple ideas. I write down, whenever I give this prompt in a few different ways, you can write down people that are in your immediate work team. People that are within your organization. You can write down colleagues that might not be in your organization, but have a similar skill set, that have a similar job. Someone within a community group that might be able to provide some insights. You are at an event right now. You can put me on the list, right? So we can put other people that are within these community groups that can help to champion your success. I also include a couple different spaces to provide mental and emotional support as well. So oftentimes I'll include maybe a family member or two. That way, if I am overwhelmed within the project, they are going to help champion my success as well. You can also include community groups in public groups, such as libraries, such as associations as well. So I encourage you to write down 15 different people that can help to champion your success, specifically within this project. Now, whenever I write down, whenever I create the list, and actually whenever I began recruiting people for my team within my company, the first thing that I asked is, who do I need to help complement my strengths? So I knew my strengths, but then I had a list of strengths that I really wish was somebody else's strength, right? So I am very much a visionary, big picture type of person. And the first person that I brought onto the team was very detail oriented, very organized, and could take a lot of information and make sense out of it. Could take a lot of information, they could organize it and analyze it. We were able to complement each other. And so I also, within building my list, look at people that can complement the skill sets that I have. And then from there, we actually have proactive conversations. Say, hey, this is probably going to be, we more than likely are going to face some frustration, some tensions, because we complement each other. We will also contradict each other in times as well. And so we were able to proactively have a conversation on how we were going to address those tensions whenever they inevitably arose. Okay, so I've been talking a little bit as you've been writing down your 15 different names. If you have not written down 15 yet, then I encourage you to do that once this session is over. So we have the name of our project. Hopefully you've written down that project in a very simple phrase. So I usually write that down in 4 words or less. And so sometimes big projects, simplifying that into 4 words or less is really difficult, but it actually makes you think about the nature of the project. So yeah, write down your project in a very simplified manner. Write down why that project needs to be done today? What will happen if it is not done? How are you going to create a sense of urgency? Next, you're going to build your guiding team. Who is going to be on your team to help champion this success? Next, you want to clarify the expectations of your project. So, we can clarify expectations a variety of different ways. But too often times I have worked with teams that have really great ideas that are trying to be implemented. And then we find that different people in the team have different definitions of success for this project. They have different definitions of how the team is going to function. Different ideas of the team dynamic. And so we clarify this in a variety of different ways, but I'm going to share a quick 2-minute activity that we're going to do today. I'm going to encourage you to do with your team. And so first, I want you to take your piece of paper and either turn it over or grab a new piece of paper. I want you to draw one line horizontally across and then draw 3 lines vertically. So you should have 8 boxes total. You have 8 boxes total. All right. So I want you to draw a picture. I know that none of us are artists here. That's totally okay. If you need to put a word, you can, but I encourage you to really try to draw a picture of what your expectation for your implementation is. Now, I'm saying this very broadly so you can interpret it depending on your specific situation. Since we're not working with a specific team and a specific project, I'm going to say it a little bit broad. So I want you to draw an expectation for your implementation project. This could be, what does success look like? It could be outcomes based. So the product will look like this. It could be teams based. We will all be happy at the end. So we're not going to get the product done, have good outcomes, but then we'll all hate each other because we've been working long hours. We'd have miscommunication. People have missed deadlines, right? So you can have an expectation for what that process is going to look like. You can have whatever expectations that you have of your project. I'm going to leave it open to you. It could be teams based. It could be outcomes based. Whatever is, you have 8 different opportunities to outline 8 different expectations for this implementation that you're talking about right now. So I'm going to give you 15 seconds per box. So you're going to spend 15 seconds drawing a photo, and then whenever I say next, you will immediately leave this box and move to the next box. And then we'll do this for all 8 total. If you have any questions, or if I have not clarified that, those instructions, then I am available in the chat. More than welcome to reach out. So, I'm going to get my watch ready. Whenever I say next, you are going to immediately move to the next box. Ready, set, go. What is an expectation that you have of your implementation of your project? What is an expectation? Next. It's not a lot of time. 15 seconds is not a lot of time. Next. Next box. Next box. You're halfway there. Next box. What is an expectation that you have of your project? What's an expectation that you have of your team? Next box. What is your expectation for this implementation process? Next box. One left. Whoops. Move that. 3, 2, 1. All right, time. Okay. On a scale of 1 to 10, 1 being that was super easy, Amber, 10 being that was the hardest thing ever. Go ahead and put in the chat, how was that? Go ahead and put that in the chat. All right, awesome. So now you should have what your project is, what your sense of urgency is, who is actually on your team, what are your expectations for success? What does successful implementation actually look like? Now, the next thing that we need to do, the next point of implementation sabotage that I often see within teams is a lack of a plan. Who would have thought? We thought implementation was all about planning, but we needed to do all of that first before we got to actual planning. And so, with our planning, I encourage you to sit down with your team and actually come up with some sort of a plan on how to implement. I personally use Agile project management quite a bit. And so if I'm working with developers, we will take a larger product, we'll take a larger project, and we will condense it into smaller user stories. And this, if you're not working with developers, it could be a smaller set of to-do lists. It could be a smaller set of these are things that need to get done. And then we will prioritize that list based off of time, off of resources, off of energy, right? So we will prioritize the list on what is going to be the most important. And then, rather than trying to take on all of the things in our to-do list or in our backlog, we take out 1 or 2 of these ideas. And then we focus in a sprint, right? So we focus very intently on 1 or 2 of these ideas. And from there, we build momentum. We get a small win and we build momentum off of those wins. From here, if we go back to Bruce Tuckman, we are able to establish our norms and perform as we are establishing and completing that one big win or that one small win, building momentum, adjourning, and going back to that storming phase and saying, how can we do better for our next sprint? Do better for our next task. So you need to have some sort of plan on how you are actually going to implement within your team. And then last but not least, you need to communicate the small wins that you have. You need to communicate the momentum that you're building. These are the top 5 aspects of ideation to implementation that I find that sabotages excellent implementation and excellent ideas within teams. Whenever I work with teams, I see excellent ideas that don't have a sense of urgency. So I encourage you to look at your piece of paper and have a sense of urgency within your team and within your idea. I see people that have excellent ideas that try to implement them all on their own, or they don't have the right people on their team. Know who is on your team. I see excellent implementation sabotaged by poor implementation or by lack of expectations, lack of continuity, miscommunication within expectations. See, not having a plan and then not clearly communicating the different wins, not constantly communicating the goals, and effectively communicating the different ideas within your team. See, I don't know about you, but I have spent a lot of time at home in the last year. And I've been able to pick up a variety of different projects, as most of us have, like building structures like this. Now, this is a little Play-Doh structure. I built this with my family. We were playing with Play-Doh. We had a lot of conversation about what color we were going to use, what shape we were going to build, what texture we were going to build. And there was a lot of stories that went into this. But it can be very easy to look at what we have now. It can be easy to look at the processes that you have now, the products that you have now, the team that you have now, and say, we worked so hard on this, I want to hold it. But if I only hold on to this Play-Doh structure, it's going to become harder to change. It's going to become outdated. It's going to become a little crusty. See, our job is not to hold, but to mold. And we have people in this event right now that are filled with excellent, amazing ideas that can transform the future. It's the name of the conference. We must be able to take these ideas and effectively go from ideation to implementation so that we can expand bigger and better than we ever did before. Thank you all so much for having me today. I encourage you to I hope that this was helpful. I encourage you to look at your piece of paper and all of the different activities that we did. I hope that they were helpful as you implement the great ideas that you have. I am available. You can reach out to me on LinkedIn, on Twitter. I'd be happy to have a conversation to discuss a little bit more. Again, my name is Amber Vanderburg from the Pathways Group. Thank you so much and have a great rest of your day.